Hello and welcome, I'm Dante from Low Manor, and I just want to start off by thanking everyone for their support on our last Anthem video. If you have anyone from the community, whether that be an artist, content creator, or even an interesting discussion on Reddit, please let me know, as I want to get the word out of all the talented people doing stuff in this community. With that said, today I'm going to go through some more of the information from the recent full demo. By this point we all know what the Javelins are: Ranger, Colossus, Storm, and Interceptor. With a lot more information soon to be coming down the pipeline. I'm going to be deep diving into what information we already have. So first off, what slots do Javelins have available in terms of equipment? There are 2 weapon slots, the primary and secondary. These differ slightly for each Javelin, as they all have their own specializations. But for the most part, there are some shared weapons, such as the assault rifles, along with some specialized ones for the Colossus like miniguns. Most of the personality from Javelins comes from the ability loadouts. Due to flying around in mech suits, these are for the most part weapons. Each Javelin gets 2 of these, combines with their melee weapon and an ultimate ability to create their loadout. For the time being, only 2 abilities can actually be swapped out for others, but Bioware have said other options may open up after launch. One hidden ability each Javelin possesses is an aerial maneuver. The Storm has teleport, the Ranger has a roll, and unfortunately the Colossus is a little too large. The trade-off for carrying all of the artillery, I'm afraid. So now we know what the loadout consists of, what have we seen so far? All of this information is taken from either the 90-minute gameplay demo or the shortened version from the E3 press conference, which unlike the full demo had different points of view, even if they were brief. The primary Colossus we see is obviously where we get the most information, armed with a minigun in the primary slot and a grenade launcher as a secondary. These are both Colossus specific weapons. Being equipped as a medium to long range Javelin, the abilities support this style, focusing on dealing damage at a very long range. The first is a multi-mortar strike, a large AoE damage ability that triggers off frozen enemies to do extremely high damage in a rather large radius. The second is a railgun shot. In the opposite role of the mortar, the railgun, as you would expect, does extremely high single target damage, able to one-shot the standard enemies. Being a Colossus, we also see a shield acting as a deployable melee weapon, but it does take damage and can be broken. The actual melee strike though is a ground slam, giving the Colossus some nice utility. The ultimate though is very impressive. The closest comparison I can think of is the classic BFG or the nuke launcher from Fallout, an actual tactical nuke that can fire up to 3 times in one activation, causing an explosion that will fill the screen from miles away, which apparently had its damage rolled back slightly for the demo, which is somewhat terrifying, and I can't wait to try it out for myself. The second Colossus, while keeping the shield and nukes, has the opposite loadout, but it's not got the weapons you'd think from the coverage. The primary you would assume would be the Flamethrower, but if you look at the icons, this isn't the case. It seems to be another minigun, like the first. The secondary seems to be a combat shotgun, but we don't get to see it in action. The 2 abilities though are both the main difference and very noticeable. The first is a firewall that we see used to canvas an enemy spawn point as a swarm attack during the hive fight. The second ability is the Flamethrower, which unlike the other abilities so far has an ammo counter. Personally I was expecting these on more of the abilities, but it's possible they just haven't locked these down. It does raise the question if they are set ammo amounts per excursion or if we can get refills along the way. The Ranger was the first Javelin we saw, and up until now has been the one we know the most about. Their kit hasn't really changed too much since we saw them last. The version we got to see this time did have a few upgrades over the last one, such as the legendary rifle being used as their primary, a pistol taking up the secondary slot. Their primary ability has been shown as one of the best setups, the Cryo Grenade. Fully freezes standard enemies and heavily slows the elite versions. The version of this we got to see was actually a legendary itself, and has an additional effect that caused frozen targets that died to cause additional explosions, which we see here. This is the type of thing we want to see in legendary effects, at least to start with. The other ability I don't think we got to see at all, but it looks like it could be a missile barrage of some kind. But this could easily be confused with the ultimate of the Ranger, a giant missile barrage that locks onto targets over a few seconds, then launches dozens of missiles at them, which we've got to see multiple times since the game's announcement. Finally, the melee weapon of this Javelin is a shockmaul, seen briefly in the trailer, but it does look awesome. The last Javelin we have is the Storm, which has significantly less info than the others. Well, besides the Interceptor, which we know nothing about. From what we know of the Storm, the one used in the demo was a lower level than the others, so it was lacking in legendaries, but came with an assault rifle and pistol like the Ranger. Surprisingly enough for a glass cannon, it had the first defensive cooldown that we've seen, a deployable shield. That seems to be usable on other members of your party. The second ability looks to be a lightning blast. That really gives me Mass Effect vibes. I'm not sure we get to see this anywhere, but we certainly get to see the ultimate version. A giant lightning strike over a huge area, seen several times to set up huge damage. Their melee weapon hasn't been revealed, but from the last AMA, it's possible they have a sword of some kind. From what we've seen so far, that covers the Javelins. There is of course one more that we know essentially nothing about, the Interceptor. If I was to speculate, just a little, I would assume that although not locked down, the focus of the Interceptor is to be the most mobile, essentially the counterpoint to the Colossus. From the images we have seen, they seem to be using a dagger as their melee weapon. And while the Ranger and Colossus have shoulder-mounted missiles and mortars, whereas the Interceptor has this. It might just be me, but this seems more like an antenna. There are several ways it could be used, but the most obvious, and I predict the fan favourite, would be stealth. But what would a Javelin even use stealth for? They are giant killing machines, so either this serves a purpose of general survival, or they gain additional effects for being in stealth. Scouting, vision, disruption, or even bonus damage. Maybe that's something we get to choose. Alternatively, what if they can choose who gets stealth? There are a lot of questions to be answered. We should, at least in theory, have answers relatively soon. In terms of what weapons they might use, with the thoughts of stealth fresh in my mind, I think they would be the perfect Javelin to use the sniper rifle we've heard of. Perhaps they are even specialised in it. If I was to give a comparison to another game of what I think they'll be, Zero from Borderlands seems to be reasonable. High damage, mobility, stealth can be built either close or long range. But before I start to ramble too much, I'd like to hear what you think. Before I end this video, something I want to at least acknowledge, you might even consider a concern, is that there aren't many slots. 2 weapons, which is perfectly reasonable, but only 2 ability slots. We know armor isn't an item drop, so how much customization can we truly get from only 2 abilities? Personally, I see this either as a vast underestimate of how much loot people want to see drop, collect, and just options in general, or we are missing something major in the loot department that hasn't been discussed. I suspect, but this is by no means confirmed, that we will be seeing a mod item, or additional item like those that slot into our loadouts. This could be into weapons, the abilities, even the suit itself. A way to focus its purpose. I've said before that I have hopes of this game, and that they are taking inspiration from the right places. I just can't wait until we get that confirmation. As always, I love to hear your feedback. Let me know what you'd like to be covered, improvements I can make, or just your opinions on what I discussed here. Don't forget to like this video if you found it useful, subscribe to support the channel, and use the bell to be notified of new content as it goes live. Until next time, I've been Dante, thanks for watching.